Blood eagle. A horrifying execution where the victim's ribs were severed from the spine and spread outward to mimic wings, while the lungs were pulled through the wounds, leading to a slow and agonizing death. Branding iron, a heated metal stamp, was pressed onto the skin to leave a permanent mark. This method caused immense pain and served as a lifelong reminder of the punishment. Brazen bull. A metal bull-shaped statue where victims were locked inside and burned alive as a fire was lit underneath. The design amplified the screams, which sounded like a bull's roar while steam escaped through the nostrils for added effect. Breaking wheel. A punishment where the victim's bones were shattered and the body was twisted around a wheel. Victims were then displayed high up, left to die slowly from their injuries and exposure to the elements. Breast ripper used predominantly on women. This heated device was designed to tear flesh from the breasts, leaving permanent scars and inflicting excruciating pain. Kangai, a large, heavy wooden board locked around a person's neck, making movement and eating extremely difficult. This method was used to publicly shame the victim as well as to punish them physically. Castor oil victims were forced to drink excessive amounts of castor oil, causing severe stomach pain and uncontrollable diarrhea. Sometimes they were placed in a barrel filled with their own waste until they confessed or succumbed. Choke pear, a metal device inserted into the victim's mouth or anus, then expanded. This caused extreme stretching and irreversible damage to the tissue. Head crusher, a brutal device that gradually tightened around the victim's head, causing excruciating pain before ultimately crushing the skull. It was often used to extract confessions. Heretic's fork, a device consisting of a collar with metal forks on both ends. One fork rested under the chin, and the other pressed against the chest. The collar forced the victim to keep their head raised, causing intense discomfort and preventing sleep. Victims were often questioned or left in this position until the forks pierced the neck and jaw. Iron chair, a chair made of iron with spikes covering the seat and armrest. Victims were forced to sit on it for extended periods, enduring immense pain. Keel hauling, a maritime punishment where the victim was dragged under a ship from one side to the other. If they survived drowning, they often suffered fatal injuries from the ship's hull. Lingchi, known as death by 1,000 cuts, this method involved systematically cutting away pieces of the victim's flesh until they died. It was designed to inflict maximum pain and prolong suffering. Only 1% of the fastest people can click on like button and subscribe before time runs out. Write on the comments done if you did it on time. Pau de arara, a form of torture where victims were suspended by a rod with their wrists and ankles tied together. Though not intended to be fatal, it often caused long-term joint damage. Pendulum, a sharp blade suspended above the victim swung back and forth, gradually lowering and cutting deeper with each swing. Rack, the victim was tied to a wooden frame and stretched by pulling their arms and legs in opposite directions. This caused severe pain, dislocated joints, and torn ligaments, often used to extract confessions. Scaphism, a torturous method involving trapping a victim in a boat and covering them with honey and milk to attract insects. They were force-fed the same mixture to induce diarrhea, attracting more insects. The insects would bite and burrow into the victim's body, leading to prolonged suffering. This process was repeated daily, with some victims surviving up to 17 days before dying. Scavenger's daughter, a compression device that forced the victim into a crouched position, causing extreme pain. Unlike the rack, which stretched the body, this method focused on intense compression. Scold's bridle, a metal frame placed on the head with a gag inside the mouth. Spikes on the gag injured the tongue if the victim moved it. This device was commonly used to silence women accused of gossiping or nagging, humiliating them publicly and restricting their speech. Strappado, this method involved binding the victim's hands behind their back and hoisting them into the air by a rope tied to their wrists. This often resulted in dislocated shoulders and was sometimes intensified with added weights. Tongue tearer, a device used to grip and tear out the tongue, inflicting severe pain and permanently silencing the victim. Ironically, it was sometimes used to extract confessions. White room, a psychological torture method where the victim was placed in a completely white, soundproof room with no stimuli, often leading to hallucinations and mental breakdowns. Oubliette dungeon, A dungeon designed as a deep, narrow pit where prisoners were dropped and left to die from starvation or neglect. The name comes from the French word for to forget. Human cages victims were locked in metal cages and displayed publicly, sometimes while still alive, to humiliate them and serve as a warning to others. Spanish tickler, a claw-like instrument used to tear flesh from the body, starting with superficial wounds before causing deeper, more gruesome injuries. Bamboo torture. A bamboo shoot was placed against the victim's body, often inserted into an orifice. The bamboo would grow rapidly, piercing the victim and causing excruciating pain. Flaying alive. A torturous method where the victim's skin was removed while they were still alive, leading to a slow and painful death. Judas chair. A pyramid-shaped seat where the victim was lowered onto the sharp apex using ropes, causing severe pain and internal injuries. Iron Maiden. A coffin-like chamber with spikes on the inside that would pierce the person placed inside once it was closed. Spanish donkey. A sharp-angled wooden device on which the victim was forced to sit, straddling it like a donkey with weights attached to their feet. This would increase pressure and pain on the body, often causing severe injury to the legs and spine, until the victim was ripped apart by their body weight. Crocodile shears. A torture instrument designed to cut off the victim's limbs. The shears had a heated, serrated edge forming a crocodile's jaws and were often used on metal workers or to punish those who attempted robbery. Chinese water. A method where water droplets are repeatedly dropped onto a person's forehead for an extended period. This causes psychological distress and can lead to extreme anxiety and even madness, as the constant drip becomes unbearable over time. Thumb screw. A device that applied painful pressure to the thumbs or fingers by tightening the screws. The device would crush the digits, causing intense pain. It was commonly used to extract confessions or punish thieves and other criminals. Whirligig, a torture device that spun the victim around at high speeds, causing disorientation, nausea, and potentially physical harm due to the centrifugal force. Stress positions being tortured. Using stress positions is like enduring a twisted yoga class where the instructor seems to be the devil himself. Utterly indifferent to safety and taking pleasure in your suffering while you're contorted like a pretzel. This method of torture is specifically designed to make you miserable without causing injuries or leaving visible marks. You're forced into an uncomfortable position that might seem tolerable for a few seconds, but becomes a serious challenge for both your body and mind when held for minutes or even hours. Imagine being told to hold a plank position, not for 30 seconds, but for hours on end.
I don't think you can click on the next video before 3 seconds runs out. 3, 2, 1.